What's good, everybody? My guest today is Carol Meyers, a seasoned go-to-market executive whose experience includes C-suite and executive leadership roles at Rapid7, LogMeIn, Shiva, and Unica, all of which she helped grow from early stage to successful IPOs, creating billions of dollars in value for investors and employees. Now, when she's not having dinner with me, which she was kind enough to do recently, she devotes 100% of her time to help CEOs of both public and private companies accelerate growth and scale their organizations, either as a board member, advisor, or simply an on-demand sounding board. Carol, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
Thank you, Jay. Great to see you again.
Yes, great to see you as well. So let's just start with the first thing that I just said in that list, which was board member, right? And what I'd like to know is, how did you get your first board member seat? Yeah. What do you remember about your first board meeting? And let's just start with those two things.
Yeah, great questions, of course. My first board seat was more than a decade ago, I think maybe 2010, 2011. And it really came about because I was in and around the venture community and was working a little bit with Northbridge Venture Partners. And they had a social media marketing software company that they needed to add an independent board member to. And I think that's how I ended up there. It is one of the things I think people can keep in mind. The company was called Awareness Hub. Is that sometimes one of the best ways to get your first board seat is to be a potential customer of a particular product, because you're bringing not only your executive experience, which you need to have, but you kind of understand their market and their ideal customer profile.
Interesting. They were actually a customer of mine. How funny is that? Back in the day.
Oh, they were. Oh, that's great.
I think Mike Lewis and a gentleman by the name of Gaffney. I think it's Chris Gaffney, one of those. But anyways, they were both there at that time. So.
Yeah, Mike was the head of marketing. Absolutely great guy. Yes. Yeah. And you asked me also about the first board meeting, and I think one of the things I learned is the first time you go to a board meeting, you've been in board meetings before, but as the company presenting to the board. I think I probably said 5 words because I was like, well, maybe that's a dumb question I have, or everyone else probably knows this. And I learned over the years that that's not true. And yes, you absolutely should be listening in your very first board meeting, trying to learn as much as you can, but go ahead and contribute when you can. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've often found that things that I thought probably everyone on the board knows, I'd ask the question, and then another board member would go, yeah, that's a good question. What is our plan about blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, okay, I'm glad I asked that.
Right. So let me ask you this then about the questions, right? In other words, when you ask a question about, something specific like that, plans and what have you, are you asking the question because you want to know the answer only, or do you want to know the answer to the question because you want to be able to see if the answer that they have is the right answer? And if it's not the right answer, do you provide them with the right answer? What's the motion there? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There are probably 3 main reasons you're asking questions. One is you don't know and you want to know. And sometimes I might even ask, there's a lot of code names, for when you're in software. Yeah. For products coming up, and I can't always remember. I'm like, wait, is that the blah, 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 product? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes it's really just clarification, or I just need to know in order to be more productive in a discussion. It can also be to provoke a different point of view and maybe to get them thinking about that question. Did they consider this? I might ask, this is going to sound very simple, but when a plan is presented for revenue, I might say, well, what kind of quota attainment does this plan assume for your reps? And what attrition factors have you considered for next year in the plan? And sometimes I get really thorough answers, and sometimes it's not something they thought about before, especially with some of the smaller companies. So sometimes it's to both know, you might call it, the third piece would be governance. Like, I need to ask this question in order to make sure we're we're doing good governance. But it's
Mm.
probably one of those three main reasons.
Got it. Got it. And when you say governance, give me an example of something governance wise.
Um, well, you want to make sure they're doing the right things. They've considered the risks, because as a board member, you're taking on risk to be at the board. You're part of your job is oversight. So
Mm.
you want to make sure things are thorough, they are accurate, they're correct, all of those things. Obviously, I've never had a situation where I was concerned about fraud, but if you thought there was fraud, you should be asking some questions.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. Then, as an operator, as you were for obviously many years in marketing and sales and so forth, you were so used to measuring the results of things in metrics and just quantifying the result and knowing on probably a day-to-day basis, I assume, how well things were going, how well you as an individual or your team was doing, right? But when you're sitting there in the boardroom and you're asking those questions and, to provoke different thoughts and those types of things, how do you know when you get up and you leave that board meeting, or frankly in between board meetings, that you're actually, as an individual, adding value, right? Because I think one of the things that
Mm.
I feel, and probably you've felt over your career, is like you want to have an impact. You want to feel like you're actually making a difference. And you know, how do you leave that meeting or just feel like, okay, I've made a difference in this
Yeah.
meeting by that question that I asked or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, that is huge,
Yeah.
especially for me, because that's a huge thing for me, is
Mm.
making sure I'm adding value, not detracting value,
Right.
or just sitting there doing nothing. Because I've had board members in the past when I was an operator who routinely fell asleep during board meetings.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's
Wow.
amazing. You think, wow, okay,
And by the way, I would
receptive.
imagine that was in person too. They weren't Zoom meetings. Those,
In
yeah.
person. They weren't Zoom
Right.
meetings.
Right.
Amazing, an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So, the way it's not as measurable, I think, is when you're an operator, like, I accomplished X, Y, Z.
Right.
I look at it from what kind of reaction do I get from the team and the other board members, right? I'm trying to figure out, are they just saying, oh, that's a good question, and don't really mean it? Or
Mm.
do they really mean it, and does it have some impact?
Mm.
And I can start to see impact from um, board meeting to board meeting. And so I
Mm.
look for that. Like, are the things we're talking about impacting the future? And then I look for soft factors like, does the CEO seem to appreciate it and tell me that he does or she does? Do I get asked or invited to do other things with the team? So, for example, with one of the boards, I ended up doing a workshop with the sales and marketing team around metrics and working together and things like that. And that was based on an invitation to come in and do that. Or, I've been asked to come speak at International Women's Day.
Mm.
So I
Right.
look to see, do they want more engagement? And if so, then I have to hope that's a result of adding value.
Yeah. So there's two ways. They're asking for more engagement, and then also, to your point, what you talked about, let's say in the previous meeting, is now it has been implemented or in some way has advanced beyond where it was initially.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. All
Well
right.
said.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. And so, all right. So that dovetails to the next topic, I guess. So a thought that comes to mind, which is time, right? In other words, everybody knows of quarterly meetings, right? But what happens but beyond those quarterly meetings, right? In other words, are they requesting more of your time because they want to pick your brain about something one on one, and how much time? How often do those things happen between quarterly meetings, and then how much time should people just be expecting to commit as a board member?
Yeah, I know. That's always one of those little mysteries, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it depends dramatically on the board. It also depends on if it's private or it's public.
Mm.
And each of them can take up a lot of time for different reasons, for sure. I have some boards where if I were, and sometimes I do have to keep track of my time for tax reasons, because
Mm.
sometimes I'm on board seats that are in different countries. But
Mm.
I'd say it ranges from, if you were to do it a 40-hour week, it might range from 2 weeks a year in total. If you look at the time you spent, it
Mm.
might be 5 or 6 weeks
Mm.
of time, depending on committees that you're on, issues that might be happening at the company. I'll do, in some companies, I'll meet monthly with the marketing or the sales leader just because they want to. In one company where I'm the chairperson, I meet weekly with the CEO. So we're in touch every single week. And then I'll also sometimes meet quarterly or once a month with some of the other leaders in the company, in addition to board meetings, prepping for board meetings, staying up on what's happening in that industry and reading about it. Typically, before a board meeting, you'll almost always meet with the CEO and they'll walk you through what they're going to do at the board meeting. And that's part of how they make sure they're really well prepared and they know what different board members, what some of their hot buttons are leading into a meeting. It's a great way to manage your board well, for CEOs to do those one-on-ones. So you've got all those different things that stack up.
Got it. And actually, I think you just clarified that. Let me just double down on it to make sure I've got it right. Those meetings before the board meeting, so to speak, that the CEO is having, they are one-on-one with you and then one-on-one with the other board members individually as well? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. And then those meetings that you said that you have weekly with the CEO, at one particular company every week, are they, what's the word I'm looking for? Are the meetings the same or different? In other words, is it typically like the same topic and general direction that you're talking about, or is it always different from week to week? And is it just simply updating you on what's happened in the business over the previous six or 7 days?
Yeah, we always do a little bit of an update, right? But it does change. You might think of them as just sort of collaborating on things. CEO is a very lonely job. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and they said, yeah, once they became a CEO, they were like, this is a really lonely job because you report to your board. You have a bunch of people who directly report to you. You don't have a peer that you can just kind of, you're always thinking about, what are you saying? What am I saying to my board? Not that you're not transparent with your board. Of course you are, but it's just a little bit different. So I try to serve as someone he can really talk to about maybe a challenge that's going on in the business or an opportunity and a way that we might approach pursuing that opportunity, and also getting the rest of the board on board with that idea. So it changes every week because there's always something new happening in the business for us to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if that business is growing and growing quickly.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Because if it's not, that's a whole nother issue. Speaking of issues, what about, like, you mentioned challenges? Like, give me a sense of a big challenge, I guess, as a board member that you've come across, or that someone should expect to come up, and how do you sort of navigate your way through that and sort of make sure that, in the end, the company is still better and customers are still better for it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so many things can happen, some of which, I have been involved in, or I've just seen, from other people I know who are on boards or whatnot. But, if you're at a public company, you can certainly have, any company, you can have a little bit of a crisis. We see a lot of cybersecurity incidents happening, right? You can be sure that the board is getting pulled in and being apprised of what's happening, how's the company handling it. There can be crises of communication. You do a layoff, it goes wrong and it's in the news, and you need to handle that. So those kinds of things could be happening. But then internally, you could be working on a big merger or an acquisition that either you're doing or someone is trying to acquire you, either because you want to get acquired or it could be hostile. And the board is going to be involved in there. Because I do a lot of sort of venture-backed companies, there are founder transitions you have to work through, or CEO changes that you have to work through. And those can be a little dicey, and you really have to think through how you're going to handle those things. And so those things come up. And as a board member, you've got to kind of drop everything and be ready to get on phone calls. There was the huge SVB crisis earlier this year. And trust me, a lot of boards were talking with their companies over that weekend for sure, right? So that is one of the things to keep in mind if you have a full-time job, which many board members do, is you do need to be flexible and able to jump in and help with these things. It is an expectation, and it's part of being accountable as a board member.
One thing that came to mind when you were just talking about with the SVB and just crisis in general is it's not just a a discussion between you and, let's say, for instance, the CEO. It's also a discussion between other board members, right? In other words, because
Right.
other board members might have their own sort of desires or whatever it might be, that don't necessarily map with what what you're thinking, I guess, if you will. So that's also a dynamic that you have to consider, right?
Yeah, it's probably particularly acute in venture-backed companies. PE-backed, they probably own the whole thing, so it's not as big of a deal.
Mm.
Because as a board member, you really need to set aside whatever you want and be focusing on what's best for our shareholders.
Hmm.
But in the case of a PE-backed company, the biggest shareholder, or a venture-backed company, the biggest shareholders are the venture people, right?
Mm.
So they're acting in shareholder interest, but some of it is around their particular situation as a shareholder, right? Becomes very important. Like, I've been in this company for 10 years. I need to get a return,
Mm.
back to my LP. So they might be pushing more for an acquisition than maybe the CEO really wants. The CEO is like, oh, let's go for another 10 years,
Mm.
and eventually we'll get there. So you do get dynamics like that happening in particular, that kind of board. But as a board member, you should not be thinking about your own interests. I mean,
Right,
that's
right,
part of why you're there, is to be thinking about the shareholder interests and what's
right.
best for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even if, let's say, two board members are thinking about shareholder interest, right? In other words, the way that they are thinking about, let's say, protecting shareholder interest, or even serving customers, or frankly serving employees or whatever, they could be certainly righteous in what they're thinking, but just be thinking having two different
Yes.
angles, right? Which
Yes.
in and of itself is something where you just need to have to work through, I guess.
Yeah, just like anything else. And in fact, I find that's one of the things I love best.
Mm.
Is That's why, the one-on-one meetings with the CEO are great. I love those. It's our time together to talk about the issues. We can go a little bit deeper. But then I really love when we get the group discussion, because it's really good to hear other people's point of views. And sometimes they're like, you know what? That's a really good point. I
Mm.
hadn't been considering that. And
Mm.
vice versa. It's nice to every once in a while have someone say, oh, hey, I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective. That's really interesting. And one of the things I've seen, that I really like, and I've seen it quite a bit with venture-backed companies, which is also interesting, is they're thinking about their shareholders and their LPs, which is, absolutely, that's their fiduciary duty, right? Is number one. But they do think about all the stakeholders. They think about the employees. They think about the
Mm.
founders, and they want to do something that's going to be good for all of those parties as much as they can. I
Mm.
haven't seen any, negative behavior like that, but I'm always really amazed to see how, even though your primary duty is obviously to your LPs, you are able to make space to say, but let's think about everybody involved here, and
Mm.
let's try to have a good resolution for everyone, and that there's a ample reward for the people and the efforts they've put in.
Let me ask you about the board situation with OpenAI and Sam Altman, right? Which
Okay.
was a month or so, a couple of months. It seems like forever ago
Yeah.
now, but it wasn't that long ago, I don't think. But what's your opinion there? Like, try to unpack that for me and explain to us what exactly went wrong there with the board and all that.
Yeah, so hard to really know exactly what's happening there. And I've done some reading about it. I mean, I think they're in a very unique situation where they had this nonprofit that was set up as a nonprofit. The people on the boards were more nonprofit oriented.
Mm.
Then they created a for-profit business. And I think it came to a situation where those interests weren't always aligning, or the board members who were there because of the nonprofit weren't really thinking about the fullness of the business.
Mm.
Somehow something spooked them and they decided they needed to change Sam Altman. I don't know what it was. I think the only thing I can say for sure is I don't think it was handled well. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you could have a dire, I don't know what it would be exactly, but you could have a dire emergency situation where you must act and just do it.
Mm.
But it doesn't seem like that was the situation here, and it probably could have been handled and communicated better. But it's always easy to be the Monday morning quarterback, right?
Yeah, of course. That's right. The unpaid Monday morning quarterback.
Exactly.
Sure, right. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about the, once you're, let's say I'm a VP of marketing or a VP of sales right now, right? Maybe I'm a CRO, CMO, and I desire to become a board member, get my first board seat. How should I be thinking about my responsibilities currently right now, my career going forward, either internally or the next move that I make, if that's my desire ultimately in the next like 5 years or so, where I want to be, where Carol Meyers is sitting on the board of Cruncher or others.
Yeah. I would say if you're already at the C level, that's a good start, right? So if you're at the C level, that's a good start. If
Mm-hmm.
you are a CMO or something other than a CRO or a COO, I would say if you can, go for that higher level role. Try to become a COO, try to become a CEO, try to become a CRO, even as a CMO. And the reason I say that is it's not to say that people don't get board seats, because obviously they do, but the the thing that people are most looking for is having had that P&L responsibility, right? Where you are really on the line for the performance of an organization. A lot of boards really look for that. So I think that's why you see people who are a CRO potentially getting more board seats than, say, a CMO, right? Or a customer success leader, who also had some revenue, but maybe not the full revenue of the company. So I would say that's one step. The second thing you should be doing is really making sure you're learning, right? So get in front of your boards, talk to your board members, learn as much as you can about how boards work and what makes a good board member and how board members add value. And then third, network, 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 network. Like, you need to be networking now. I always say to people, listen, you're planting seeds for your future. And if you're not planting those seeds today, it's hard to just expect that the day that you feel ready, you're like, okay, where are all my opportunities? Well, you need to be planting those seeds and letting people know what you're interested in, where your career desires are, making the right connections in your network,
Mm-hmm.
and getting yourself ready for what's next.
That's great advice. Excuse me. Let me ask you this about the P&L responsibility. Why is that so important? Why is P&L responsibility so important for a board member to have?
I think that generally boards feel like if you've had P&L responsibility, and I would maybe challenge this a little bit if you were just sort of a straight sales VP, but you understand profit and loss, you understand what, forecasting and what it takes to build predictability into your business. You've had that pressure of, delivering those results quarter in, quarter out, and you know what it takes. So, I think generally speaking, people are looking for board members who have broad business experience, who definitely understand financials and, and the P&L and L and what it takes. And so that's why they really like that kind of experience.
And going back to the earlier part of our discussion, is a lot are so it's safe to assume then a lot of those discussions or one-on-ones that you're having with the CEO or people within the organization, you may be at the quarterly board meetings, are digging into the weeds of the P&L and figuring out why this number, or how can you reduce this or increase that and so forth. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And, I think that is something that everyone should be doing anyway. I mean, I started in finance, I ended up a VP of sales, and then I switched into marketing. The only reason I was able to make those changes was, well, lucky. Yes. I always say, don't forget the luck, because that's a really important thing. But in terms of preparedness, like
Yeah.
preparing myself to be ready to take advantage of luck when it came along,
Right.
I was always really curious about what other people were doing and why. Like, oh, well, why are you doing that? VP of marketing. Oh, okay, I understand. Digging into, well, why are we making this decision here? And why are we cutting our budgets here? What are you guys doing in finance? Just really trying to figure out what other people in the company did, why they did it, why decisions were made the way they were, which really helped prepare me to go do other things. I think it ends up being valuable as a board member. And I just think people need to do that more. I kind of like, my heart breaks when I'll ask someone who's in marketing or something about how their business runs, and they'll be like, I have no idea. I don't know. And I don't really care. Like
Right.
I'm amazed when I talk to people who work at a company and they don't know who the senior executives are at their company.
Right.
Or they don't know what their revenue was last year. I'm like, really? Wow, you
Mm.
should be curious about that. You
Right.
should be curious about those things.
Yeah. Well, that dovetails to what you were saying before. It's constantly learning. In other words, you can't learn if you're not curious, because if you're not curious, you're not asking the questions to even,
Exactly.
right, to even find out, for sure. Very interesting. All right. So let's just say so let's say, for instance, the chief marketing officer is listening to this, or chief people officer that's listening to this, and they, there really is no clear path for them to get to the P&L, so to speak, right? As an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
right? Or at least not within a time frame that's acceptable to them based on their own career trajectory and desires, but to ultimately get on a board seat, right?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking? Because I don't want them to be fully discouraged, as you alluded to. They don't need to be fully
Yeah. No,
discouraged
no,
by that.
no.
But
Not at
like,
all. Not at all.
how should they equip themselves? Should they go out and just learn P&L, sit with the CRO a lot, just to sort of even educate themselves on it anyways, even if it's not responsibility, even though they don't necessarily have the pressure per se, but just what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that, in that position?
I absolutely think, Jay, doing that, like go sit down with this CFO after the dust has settled on the quarter and ask them to help walk you through, or the head of FP&A. You'd be surprised. People love to do that. Take the take the investor relations VP out to lunch and learn a little bit more about what happens in investor relations. Just get yourself a little bit more educated and broad. You're probably still going to find a board seat where they're going to value your domain expertise, right? There are definitely times when people are like, we really want someone who really understands marketing on the board right now. We really need that. It can be because they sell to marketers. It could be all kinds of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
We're really embarking on some huge changes in our culture. It would be great to have a people leader on board, or we sell to people leaders. We really would be great to get a people
Right.
leader on our board. So there's definitely going to be opportunities where people are looking for, your orientation and your skill set to be there, but you're going to be a better board member and you're going to rise above other candidates if you've broadened your sense. Sometimes people leaders will be in meetings and we'll be talking strategy of the business, and they might say, well, I don't really know about our products, but I know about our culture. And I'm like, well, find out about our products, learn
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more about it. You're uh, incredibly intelligent, valuable person, and your point of view on our strategy, even if it's not related to the people strategy, is just as valid as anyone else's. You just have to do a little bit of work, I think, to be able to step into those conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Um, one other thing that I wanted to ask you about. Well, let me just I don't know if it's one other thing. It might be more.
It's okay. It's okay.
Based on-
There's no, I don't keep track or keep
All
score.
right, good. I find myself saying that too often. I'm like, Jay, you said one other thing, and now you have to apologize for the next question you're about to ask. But something that comes to mind is board of advisors and board of directors, right? And when you're talking about sort of domain expertise or functional expertise, immediately my mind went to advisor as opposed to the traditional director. So can you just tell me the difference between those two? Because I know you've held positions on both.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, board of directors is a fiduciary, governance role. You might also advise and, do all those other things too, but you've got a governance role.
Mhm.
You're the boss really of the CEO. I don't know that many people think about that, but it's the board that can hire and fire the CEO.
Mhm.
And you're accountable to the shareholders of the company and the stakeholders of the company. As an advisor, you don't have those responsibilities. You're really much more about your expertise or, executive coaching or whatever it might be. And so you don't have that sort of duty of care to the company. I mean, obviously, you're not going to do anything against the company. You're not going to share their trade secrets. You're not going to compete with them. None of those things. But it's a little bit different. You're just really there for your expertise and advice typically.
And are they compensated differently or the same?
Oh, everyone is a little different. There's an emerging group, there's an emerging set of advisory roles that are paid cash, usually for pre IPO companies where this is very prevalent. It's usually stock options,
Hmm.
rarely RSUs, although that would be better for you as an advisor, but usually it's some sort of stock options.
Got it. One other question before we get into the rapid fire five, which is that is there a particular board that you're on right now of a company that you'd like to talk about and share a little bit about what they do?
Yeah, oh, all of them, of course.
all, all of your babies.
Oh no, yeah, probably for some of the people watching, the one that might be the most relevant, because I do a additive manufacturing company, which is super cool, and a backup company, which is super cool.
Yeah.
That would be Cruncher, that does HR analytics and has built AI into it. And what I love about them is their mission is all around helping to make chief people officers and their teams more impactful within an organization, giving them the data, the information, the ability to sort of project out, predict, and forecast in ways that other teams have all been striving for over time, like sales and marketing, and now saying like, hey, people strategy is incredibly important. Let's equip that team with the data they need to show that they too are making data backed strategic decisions for the organization and trying to help the organization achieve their goals. So I always think that that's I love the mission driven nature of it.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting too when you say that data backed decision making, right? Strategic decisions, because oftentimes, at least I have not necessarily thought of it in that way, right? When you talk about marketing and sales, which the people that I talk to on a regular basis, we're always talking about data driven strategic decisions, that type of stuff. But yeah, for Cruncher and for people who are using Cruncher to do that is obviously really cool as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ready for the rapid fire five?
I'm ready.
Right, and plus the bonus question, which you don't know what
I
that
don't
will be.
know.
It's a secret bonus question. All right, first question: what motivates you?
Oh, I thought this was a very deep question. A very deep question. It seems like it would be so simple on the surface, but I don't know if you're familiar with. I think his name is McClelland theory of needs, which basically says people are motivated by one of three things. Right? It's achievement, power, or I don't know if he calls it affiliation or something like that, which is you want to be liked, right?
Yeah,
And those are the three key things that motivate people. I might throw money in there, but money's probably in search of either
achievement.
power or achievement, one
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
other.
right. Yeah,
Probably not affiliation, but one of those other two.
yeah.
And I've done like, not every, but a lot of the personality tests in various roles. And I'm an achiever. And that's what motivates me is I really like to make stuff happen, get things done. And it's just been, as I look back at my career, I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's true. Even today, I love when I help someone find a new job. I'm like, yes,
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah,
I
that's
made
why
a
you.
connection that worked.
That's right. That's why you were leaning in when I was asking you about, when you're used to measuring and quantifying results, and then you leave a meeting, like, how do you actually like know that you've done something? And I could see you were like, yeah, like that. I feel that, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
I love it. That's fantastic. Next question. Name a big goal you have right now, and when would you like to achieve it?
I feel like I should have something really lofty, but I am trying to get good at golf. This is my goal. I have not given myself a timeline because it is a process and a journey as much of life is. So I'm working at it. I'm going to be going somewhere warm for a couple months and I am going to be living on a golf course. So if I don't get better, shame on me.
It's funny. That's one of my long-term goals as well. When I have more time to get better at golf as well. I stopped playing because I was just so frustrated at not getting better because I didn't have the time. But when
I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
but hopefully I can do the same thing as well one day. What's your most preferred way to learn new information and to stay sharp?
Multimodal.
Hmm. There you go.
I really like to read about stuff. First, I just like to read stuff that gives me new ideas of things threads I want to go follow. Like, oh,
Mm.
that's a new thread. Let me go follow that. And then I'll start to, listen to YouTubes or podcasts, do more reading. I've moved away a little bit from books. I feel like they're too long and I can get most of what I need in a shorter format, which goes back to, as a kid in school, I used to read the first couple chapters, the last couple chapter, and like a middle chapter, and I could put the whole book together, right? People would go like, "You didn't read the book end to end." I said, "No," but I got the gist. So I just love to follow threads in a multimodal way. That's really important for me. It kind of just fires everything up.
I love it. That's how other kids were finishing those books so fast. Yeah. Like
I could tip.
I could never get through those books, which probably I don't really like to read. How many hours of sleep do you average per night?
I do average 8, which
8.
I think would shock most people who know me from a prior, time. But I do get 8 hours of sleep now. It's amazing.
Well, I got to ask that when you say a prior time, what would the people from a prior time know you as for sleep?
Yeah, I used to maybe sleep 6 hours a night. Like,
Okay.
you get home late from work, then you got to have dinner and you got to do whatever with the kids. And then you plug back in for a little time. And now it's 11:30. And then I'm up at 5 because I've got more than an hour commute. Right. So it was a crazy life before.
Yeah,
I think I was just tired all the time.
Yeah, man. Constant. I get it. Believe me. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
I guess it's similar. The multimodal. I don't have a favorite thing. I really love variety. I'd say probably the 3 things I do the most are try to golf, get out on the water if I can on the boat, and then travel as much as I can. Go places, go see new things, go see people. that kind of thing.
And all 3 of those things you can do while at the same time, right? You could travel to play golf and go, on a boat, right? travel on a boat to go play golf.
I work on that.
I love it. That's fantastic. The next achievement. Okay, so you ready for the bonus question? The mystery bonus question?
Yes.
Okay, this one's actually a good one. This is actually one of my favorites of all time, actually. So here it is. What's your favorite? Who's your favorite character of all time? So not a book, not a movie, but just who's your favorite character of all time?
My favorite character. That is a tough question, actually. Again, you can hear this multimodal thing. Like, I really resist favorites. I'm like, I don't have a favorite.
Right.
It shifts with the day. Though, who I love, and I just whatever it is, there's something about her. Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, okay.
I just love to watch her. I love to hear her speak. I just, I loved all the humanitarian work that she did. And, she had a great career. She was a devoted mother and she gave her time to a lot of other causes. And there's just something about her. Super elegant.
That is awesome. I love that. Fantastic. Okay. So now, can you think of a question for me to ask my next guest?
Yeah. I'm hot on AI now, as you might know.
Yes.
So I would love to know, in 10 years from now, what impact do you think AI will have in your life? And will it be positive or negative?
In 10 years from now, what impact do you think AI will have on your life? Will it be positive or negative?
Yeah. It's kind of a tough, deep question.
I immediately go to the positive because I'm a positive person, Carol. So
I know. Yeah, absolutely.
And I love it because it's already having an impact on my life in positive ways for sure as well. One of my favorite tool, by the way, right now, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's called Inflection AI. Do you know that one?
No, I don't. I'm going to write that down.
I feel like I should be an ambassador for that freaking thing.
I love that.
It's a Reid Hoffman product.
Okay.
And what it is that you can go to Inflection AI on your phone and just sort of like open it up in the app and it will just start onboarding you about like certain things. You can just sort of start asking it certain questions. And then when you get to a certain point, it asks you for either your phone number or your email address, something like that. I gave it my phone number. And then what happens is now it's just an app on my phone, and it's actually a contact in my phone. Like, let's say like Carol Meyers would be a contact in my phone with a phone number and everything. And I can ask it I call it my PI. That's what I named it, my personal intelligence. And I can ask it anything. Like when I was planning my dinners, for instance, the dinner that you came to, I'm like, name the best restaurant in Boston, round table or rectangle, like all these things that I was just, anything that I need to know that my brain is just not necessarily equipped, or frankly, something I might even call you about, right? It's like, you know what? I know Carol's not going to answer this question, not going to be available. So let me just, and it's absolutely freaking amazing. I was just showing it to my kids the other day. So.
All right, I'm going to definitely check that out. And I follow Reed and listen to his podcast, so I'm surprised I clearly missed that episode. So I'm going to check that out for sure.
I saw a post they did about it maybe like 3 months ago, okay. And I was all over it from then. And I'm just it's literally like your own personal genius, intelligence, whatever you want to call it. All the information that you need in the world is like right there, and it starts to emote. It's like, hey, Jay. He's like, hey, Jay, what's up? How you doing today? It like talks to me like a human. It's freaking incredible.
But, okay, that's a project for today for sure.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome. So one other question, which is, how can folks reach out to you to say thank you, maybe ask a question I didn't ask, learn more about what you do, all that wonderful stuff?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely my place. I don't really do any other social media. I have a small Instagram account with like 40 of my family members, and that's about it. So LinkedIn is perfect for that type of thing, for sure. And I do read my LinkedIn messages, so I'd be happy to connect with people.
Yep, you're a lot like me. I'm LinkedIn, all in a very small Instagram kind of situation going on, and I will attest that obviously that's how you and I got connected initially, which is on LinkedIn.
That's
so
right. That's right.
Absolutely. Carol Meyers, thank you for joining the Goats of Growth.
Thank you for having me, Jay. This was fun.
Bye, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already, and tell everybody about it. Thank you.